Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee. You have the joys of me chairing tonight, my first meeting. It might be my last. But one thing's for sure, I'll probably not be able to ask as many questions, which I'm sure you'll all appreciate. Anyway, if we get on to the agenda, just to say that online we have Adam, Sarah, Prue, Chetna and Gillian. And I understand, Gillian, that this is a very special meeting. It's your last meeting before retirement, and I had no idea you were anywhere near old enough to retire. So congratulations.
It's the die. Thank you, Jane. Much appreciated.
We go back many, many years, and it's been wonderful working with you. So you will be sorely missed by all.
Thank you.
A reminder to everybody to avoid being on your phones and be fully focused on the meeting would be great. Apologies for absence. So we've got apologies from Andrew, and Mary Louise is kindly standing in, and we've had apologies from Charles. If we go on to the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 12th of January, are people happy to sign those off as a correct representation of the meeting? Perfect. Do we have any declarations of interest? None online. Sorry, Moses? Okay. Okay, public question time. We don't have any public questions tonight. We don't have any town and parish council questions, and we don't have any councillor questions. So we will move on to the executive member update with Prue. Thanks, Prue.
Thank you, Jane. Can I add my congratulations, I suppose it is, to Gillian on reaching retirement, and we will greatly miss her. I can't remember a time without Gillian there, so it's going to be a big change. But thank you for everything you've done, and I hope you have a really happy retirement, and maybe we'll see you again in another guise. You can come and ask a public question. So that would be lovely. So I've got a sort of report of little bits, most of which are lovely because I've had some lovely visits over the last few weeks. The first one was to Bow Hunt, where we had the topping out ceremony for their new sixth form block, which will be opening. The sixth form will be opening in September. It was absolutely terrific. It looks lovely. It's a building to be proud of, and we're really pleased we were able to work with the trust to deliver that. And then also on Monday, I think it was Monday, seems quite recently, I went to Piggott to see their new buildings, which is a new hall with some sixth form space behind it and some labs and some fantastic netball courts, where the mayor was asked to shoot a goal. She almost managed it, but I think that's a bit unfair. If I was the mayor, I would refuse to do that. But it's fantastic, a beautiful modern facility with dining hall at lunchtime, but it has retractable seating, so it can be used for assemblies and all sorts of events. And the sixth form space behind is a really good work area which complements their existing sixth form facilities. And again, Wokingham has been involved in funding and delivering that, and it's really good to see that. And in between those two things, something completely different, I went to visit the new Best Start family hub, which has had its sort of soft launch last Saturday. I couldn't go on Saturday, but I went before, at Ambleside in Woodley. I'm sure officers will talk more about that later, but it's a really lovely facility, and I gather there are about 82 people there on Saturday, which is fantastic. And it's part of the changing way that we're going to be doing our engagement with families. And as I say, I think officers will talk about it later, but it's a really good first start, and we're absolutely delighted with the number of people who turned up on the first day. Amongst the other things that have been happening, we've had our area send inspection. But you won't be hearing anything about that today because we are going to be in election purdah before the report can be published, and so they will hold it over until after purdah is over. But we have got quite a lot of work to do on the government send reform agenda. They published their schools white paper, which is in some analysis of that is in the reports in front of you. I attended a seminar webinar thing held by Bridget Phillipson and various civil servants at the DFE to talk to lead members and people from health about what they're intending. There's an awful lot of work to do to get our send reform plan in. The plan has to be in mid-June, with a draft version going in mid-May, which is not that many weeks ago. I think Emma gave everybody kittens earlier on today when she said it was only 9 weeks. Vast amounts of data and a whole maturity index, I think it's called, but a big plan about the current state of our send partnership. And there's an awful lot riding on it because in the autumn the government will be forgiving councils not up to 90% of their overspend in the dedicated schools grant as it stands at 31st of March if our plan is approved. So it's all hands to the pump to get that done. And having looked at the amount of stuff that we need to do to put it in that plan, it's an enormous amount of work for everybody involved, and it's not just the council, it's also our partners in health and schools. So I wish officers all the very best of luck with that, and I know they'll be working really hard on that over the next few weeks. And I think that's everything that I wanted to say. Thank you. Happy
Thanks,
to take
Prue.
questions.
Do we have any questions for Prue? Okay, so we'll move on. Thank you, Prue. Sorry, I should have mentioned Jo Dixon's coming to present on the Youth Council, but the timing's a bit fluid because she's travelling from a meeting. She'll also have young people with her, so we've agreed that when she arrives, we'll change the agenda so that they can become the next agenda item, so they don't have to hang around too long, if that's okay with everybody. Yeah? Okay, great. So if we move on to the social care update, Adam, am I handing over? Oh, sorry. Badly bruised.
Sorry, we can't hear anything.
Sorry, Prue. Okay. So there's two parts. There's the report and then there's the dashboard as well.
Sorry, Estelle, can we take them in two parts then? Do the report, take questions, and then move on to the dashboard.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. The report basically summarises the improvement activity that we've got underway within children's social care and the early help service. The progress that we're making with the helping early and wider social care reforms. And also something that was asked for at the last overview and scrutiny, the analysis of presenting needs for children subject to plans, because we'd had that increase in plans. I won't go through the whole report because I'm assuming that people have read it, but I guess in terms of the progress that we've made or where we are in terms of our reform work and the proposed new delivery model, we are currently in our formal staff consultation, which completes at the end of next week. And following that, we'll be finalising and then looking at our comms and moving into that kind of final model. Just to kind of reiterate, I suppose, that we're looking at having a family help service, which will operate through family help pods, working with children and their families to address needs at an early stage and preventing those concerns from escalating. The principle, underlying principle behind that is to provide consistency in relationships for children and their families. So removing and reducing those unnecessary changes of worker at different points in a child's journey. We are pressing ahead with our new family group conferencing service and recruited to the manager role for that, I think in the last couple of weeks. And that's very much about providing a family group conferencing service for children and families, so an independent process for planning for children, but also about rolling out family-led decision-making approaches across the service, so that we're not just doing it in that family group conference space. We'll be doing it and looking at those approaches in all the meetings that we hold. I guess just reiterating that this is the most substantial change that we've had in children's social care in many years. And so there has been extensive workforce engagement. We're in that formal consultation process now. And there is a comprehensive learning and development programme for staff as well that has been developed through the academy, but following a survey with our staff about what they felt they would need. In terms of our helping early, we touched on before that we had quite a lot of work to do in the early help space. Because there hadn't been as much investment in that helping early space over the years, that had resulted in children and families' needs escalating before we could mobilise that support. And that has, together with some capacity challenges, led to an increase in the number of children that were waiting for an allocated worker in early help. But we've done significant work over the last 6 to 8 months. Part of that you'll hear a bit more about, but in developing the family hubs, the introduction of new roles within our front door, connecting families really early on with the right services to meet need, and that early indications of that making quite a difference. We've had very good feedback from both practitioners and families. And we've also reduced that number of children that were waiting for an allocated worker by 70%. In terms of the children with child protection plans, there's obviously detail within the report around that increase in need that we saw last year. It does look like our numbers are stabilising now, but they are stabilising higher than they were previously. We've done a lot of quality assurance activity around that to reassure ourselves and give ourselves confidence that we are applying that kind of threshold appropriately. We're not putting families through that unnecessarily. And that QA work has given assurance that there is safe, stable practice across the service. We are seeing that increase in complexity and need, and there's a number of different factors that impact on that. And certainly, I think what we know is that the work that we're doing about whilst children subject to protection plans, that there is a multi-agency response. I think we know, and where we want to be is that we can give that multi-agency, multidisciplinary response much earlier, which might prevent those needs from escalating going forward. And that's a major part of the kind of work with the reforms. Be able to see in the paper that neglect does remain the largest category. Emotional harm has increased, and there are a number of factors associated with that. Some of that is also to do with us, with some targeted work that we've done to make sure that we are recording the correct category for children, particularly when they're suffering domestic abuse. But also those wider environmental pressures that families are facing has led to that. I don't know that there's anything more there to add. In terms of looking at children we care for and care leavers, we've had a bit of a reduction in the numbers of children that we're caring for, but we are predicting or know that we are going to have an increase in the numbers of care leavers, because we've got a number of young people, children, who will be becoming care leavers over the next 2 years. So we are strengthening our offer for care leavers. We've got and developing a new care leaver hub. And so plans are underway for that too. I think improvement work, I don't know, Carrie's on the call. Carrie, I don't know if you want to add anything around the improvement work and the work of the academy.
Yes, so we've obviously in January we've had a newly appointed permanent principal social worker, which is fantastic, and that was an internal appointment. We've done obviously we've got our quality assurance framework and core audit activity, and we're in the process of reviewing our audit tool. And we, as many of you know on the call, we have Dr. Jenny Malloy, also known as Hackney Child, who is working with us initially for the first year, but actually extended for the second year, who's working really intensively with our Here For You team and our care leaver service, which is like really exciting. So yes, in June of this year, we're going to be launching our positive relationship week, and that will bring our children in care experience, young people and staff across Wokingham to support them. I'm going to do an art exhibition and a relationship awards event.
Thanks, Carrie. So yes, and I guess just overall, I wanted to say that while we know that we've got further improvement work to do, we are seeing a gradual and sustained improvement across several practice areas, and our audit programme is giving us the evidence for that. So I don't know if there's any questions.
That's great. Thanks, Estelle. Any questions for Estelle? Chris?
On the increase in children on child protection plans, how much do we feel that is more children falling into that area of need, and how much of it do we feel is us getting better at identifying those children and getting them the service that they need?
I think that we have got an increase in complexity for children and the challenges that children are facing. So I think that does account for that increase. I don't know if you want to come in, Emma, but
I think there's also a corresponding increase in the population size in the borough. So I think there was a quote. I think we're about 20. We've had a 23% increase in the last few years. I think the biggest increase in population size in when it's kind of per 10,000 within the southeast. When we're part of a regional group and in the southeast, but also and whilst not not everyone has published their figures, so we routinely sort of benchmark against. We know that in neighbouring boroughs, they've also seen a corresponding rise. I think a sort of increase in population size, the impact of cost of living, and the stresses that bring to family life have been quite significant. I think Estelle, as Estelle mentioned, historically our universal early help offer has perhaps not been as robust as we would have wanted. So I think there is an element that we are getting better at identifying, but the idea is that we need to identify an earlier point, and so that direction of travel of having hubs and teams that are based within our residents' communities that offer groups and access and advice and support is really significant. And Prue mentioned the local area send reform plan, and although probably if you speak to most DCSs at the moment, they feel like, kind of the reforms are coming from all different sides. What we do recognise is that this is a real opportunity for us to integrate services so that they make sense for families and for children, and make access easier and pathways less complicated. So that there is whilst it's a lot of work to do within a short amount of time, I think they are the right, it is the right direction of travel. It's just a little bit like everything, everywhere, all at once, that we're trying to sort of juggle and make sense of. So yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I wanted to ask about when we're looking at building our work with care leavers. One of the consistent things that comes back from care leavers generally is the issue of access to records, and how this is an important part of their empowerment.
Yes.
And coming to terms with, the reality of what has happened to them. So I couldn't quite see what progress had been made in establishing a process for that.
Well, we have a focus plan in relation to, again, I think historically that perhaps corporately the understanding about the need to really invest in this area. We have over the past year brought together resource within our information governance service so we can help support. Previously it was left to individual practitioners, and so when you're trying to juggle perhaps some safeguarding as well as getting somebody's records ready, which both are equally important, but making sure that we've got so now we have a dedicated service, and there is a recovery plan in place in terms of making sure that all of those young people who have made a request for their records, and in fact I got an update to my transformation board this morning in terms of the progress, and we are recruiting some additional support, so that because we are aware that there are some care leavers who I'm not comfortable of being in terms of how long they have been waiting, and it is really, really important that they have that. And you might be aware, just in terms of the Children's Minister announced yesterday some new standards that all councils are going to be needing to sign up to in relation to the work with Quorum around ensuring that there is full access. One of Estelle mentioned Dr. Jenny Malloy, who is a care leaver,
And what we want to, and we are in the process of doing, is making sure that we've got not just access to records, but actually there's proper support that sits alongside that helps with counselling and understanding, you know, in terms of the way in which records were written maybe 20 years ago might not be what we would write now, or explaining procedures and things like that. So that making sure that it's not just here are your records, actually that there's a wraparound support that helps people process and understand what they actually mean.
Yes, absolutely, except that work of processing is the work of the individual themselves, and we need to be, I'm sure you know this, but like we need to be careful that we're not trying to mediate that. I mean,
Absolutely.
you know, children having gone through that, they know what people think about them when you see it written down, but it is a shock. It is a shock, but you know, we need to, or I would suggest that we need to focus on the empowerment of the child rather than the protection of the institution. Yeah, I'm not saying that's what you're doing,
No,
but I know that
not
there
for
is
1
always a tension. Yeah.
I think, so you will meet Joe later, who's coming, and Joe is our participation and engagement team manager. And so her team works offline alongside our independent reviewing officers to offer advocacy, so that we have to be able to challenge ourselves in relation to practice. And it's really important, if something's not been good enough, that we say that, and we acknowledge that, and we work with whoever has been impacted in terms of trying to put that right, you know, kind of putting that right for people who might come subsequently, in terms of amending our practices and our processes. So the support for care leavers accessing their records isn't about a defensive organisational, and if somebody wanted somebody specifically independent to help them, then that's something that we would look at as an option.
Thanks, Emma. Any more, Moses?
Thanks. The document describes a major reform, family help pods, co-location and family hubs. So what are the key outcomes to be looking out for?
What are the key outcomes? I can forward you the policy documents, which refers to the Families First Partnership. So there's 2 strands, and later on in the agenda we've got the other strand, which is the Best Start in Life family hubs, and it's part of. You'll be aware that the government have made a range of mission statements which link to some key outcomes in terms of children achieving and thriving and being able to grow up independently. But there's some core principles that sit within the Families First Partnership, and that's about families being able to access intervention earlier, that there are they are supported with interventions rather than kind of having to go through multiple assessment hoops and referral hoops to different organisations. That we look at how we co-locate multidisciplinary team working within our multi-agency safeguarding arrangements, so that when so it's largely, you know, 90% of families become open to social care by virtue of circumstance, I would say, and, you know, kind of need family support and additional support. There is a smaller group of children where they may have been
you know, deliberately harmed or specifically subject to harm, physical, sexual abuse, emotional abuse or neglect. And what we are trying to gear our system is that we appropriately keep children away from their needs escalating. So we deal with their issues in terms of family help. But actually, when children really need something to the system to kick in to help to protect them, that actually we can mobilise, and we mobilise that very effectively with our statutory partners. So police, health, and a very clear steer from the government is about education being seen as a key partner within that kind of safeguarding arrangement. So we can give you some. We've got lots of presentations that we can circulate that brief around, you know, the principles and what we're working towards, that probably articulate it better than I've just done. So.
Thanks, Emma. I was going to say that's a lot of stuff you said. I asked the question because the reason why you undertake reforms is because something is not working. I wanted to be sure that you had certain baselines that you would say, okay, when we had this previous, the way we were working before, since we are going wrong, this method, this is what we are comparing, so we are improving. That's what
Yeah, so I think it's born out of, there were a number of reviews that were completed under the last government administration. So a care review, Competition and Markets Authority review in relation to children's placement costs and the impact that had on the wider system. New government came in and have been kind of picked up that work and then taking it forward in terms of giving the whole system a reset to seek to support families at an earlier point so that their needs don't escalate. So because that has a human cost, it has a financial cost when children experience harm.
okay. Yeah.
Anyone lines? No. Okay. So I quite liked decisions are made with families rather than for them, and the family-led decision making has a nice tone to it. How are we communicating that locally? Because people's thoughts, if you say children's services, child protection, it's very ooh, and that sounds a lot more inclusive. How are we getting that message across?
That's a good question. But we've got a comms plan, and following conclusion of the formal staff consultation, we'll then be entering into a phase of doing that kind of communication with our partners, but also developing a leaflet for children and families that we can take out, practitioners can take out with them and share. There's also quite a lot of work going on around the website as well, and being making our digital offer much more accessible for people to be able to you know, read and see and hear about the way that we're working.
Child protection one's been asked. Complexity we've talked. Just an observation. Anecdotally, I've heard how seriously Wokinham's taken its understanding around domestic abuse and coercive control, and that sounds like that's also having an impact in terms of picking up needs for support. So that's great. Yeah, I like the fact we talked about this at Corporate Parenting Board actually, but young people securing employment at the council. I think if we can act as an ambassador to show that, it should make it easier in the community. I know I've asked time and again about the audit sample, and it's good to see those numbers have really shifted and seem to have stayed shifted. Jenny, wow. I thought she brought a really great energy to the Corporate Parenting Board, and what a resource for us to be able to tap into. And then the art exhibition and the Positive Relationships Awards evening, is that something we'll be invited to experience? Okay, great.
It will stretch across the whole week in terms of that focus. I think it's the plan for the last week of June. So further details will be provided.
Okay, any more questions, or I'll hand back to Estelle for the scores on the doors.
Scores on the doors. So yes, again, I'm sure you had the opportunity to look at the dashboard, and will have noted that we have seen an increase in our early help, or the children that we're helping through our early help service. That, again, I think I touched on in the report earlier, the impact that these new early help coordinator roles have had to date. Just to note also that we have seen an increase in the number of re-referrals, which we do keep a really close eye on, and they are reviewed every month to look at any themes, anything that we need to pick up from that. We've seen an improvement in our assessment timescales, and that in part is due to us really sort of focusing on seeing whether we can complete assessments in much shorter time and link families much earlier with the support that they need. As touched on earlier, the numbers of children subject to protection plans seems to be sort of stabilising, but at that kind of higher level than it has been before. And looking at, I think these arrows are not quite in the right, some of the arrows are not quite right, but we have seen, we are seeing overall the number of children that we care for coming down, but predicting that increase of the numbers of children that will be leaving care, so becoming part of our care leaver community. The children not in education, employment or training, or the young people not in employment, education and training, is showing here as 41%. We know that we have got an issue with our recording, because that is at odds with what our virtual school are telling us, which is the correct figure, and it was more around 28%. So we have seen a really significant reduction, and so we're doing some focus work at the moment in terms of bringing those two sets of recording together, so that we can capture that. I think, unless I guess I think just go for questions. Actually, people have got questions about the data.
Any questions on the dashboards? Moses?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to ask why the number of children subject to child protection has remained about 30% higher than this time last year.
So I think that's some of the things that have been explored in the earlier report around looking at that analysis of need around children subject to protection plans, and thinking about, yes, we've had that kind of population rise, but also we've seen an increase in some of the challenges that children are facing through things like cost of living. We've seen need change a bit as well, but yes, we've got, you know, a number of children that are facing more complex need.
Sorry, Emma, before you speak, if my recollection is correct, you were going to, the last time we had this meeting, I asked the same question. We're going to go back and try to explain why it is. Yeah.
Moses, there's some detailed analysis in the previous report that Estelle referred to for exactly that reason. So we have quality assured, we have audited in terms of making sure that we're applying threshold consistently, and we think it's due to the rising complexity, the increase in population size. There are also probably some issues for our older young people that historically may not have been taken to a child protection conference, but we do now in relation to children who might be at risk of exploitation. So making sure that they've got that multi-agency plan of support around them. So there are a number of factors, but it's the analysis of that is contained within the report, because exactly that, you asked for that last time, that's why it's there. Okay.
Thanks, Emma. I just had one question, which might be my making a mistake. In number 3, it says our rate was 43.2, which is below the England average of 40.6. Are those numbers switched round?
That's 3.
Yeah, on page 31 at the bottom, what is the national context? Because I thought we were lower, but those figures suggest we're...
We are, yeah. Sorry, Emma, were you going to...
Does that...
But I think we are a bit higher than the national average at the moment.
Oh, so that is right.
Yeah.
So we're higher than the national average, I think, in terms of when you look at national averages. So the national average is drawn from figures a year ago, but when those figures are published, we think that we'll be broadly in line because everywhere's seen an increase.
Get you. That makes sense. Okay, thank you. Any more questions for Estelle? Any online? No. Thanks for that, Estelle. Move on to the Best Starter in Life delivery plan. I'm not sure who's presenting that.
Jonathan going to present that, Chair. The paper set out. Yeah, Jonathan is around. The paper set out the action needed to implement working on Best Starter in Life strategy. Jonathan, give it the detail. Jonathan.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Nice to be here. Sorry I can't be there in person. I've actually got a presentation. I submitted a written report, but I've got a presentation, if I may share my screen, which brings it to life a little more and gives you more of an update about recent events around Family Hub. So can I go ahead and share that?
Please do.
Sure. So as has already been covered tonight, Best Start in Life is a one aspect of a multi-layered transformational programme right across children's services. So I know it's been referenced a few times already this evening, but we are facing a really complex and fast-changing policy context, and the requirement to publish this plan that the report submitted about is part of a range of other changes happening at the moment. I probably don't need to rehearse that the list there, but just to give you an indication of how fast things are moving.
We can't see the presentation. Sorry.
Just a moment. Try again. I just gone into gear on my screen. Looks like you were seeing it.
Yeah.
Is that working? Oh, okay. Apologies for setting off without double checking. So this gives you really an overview of much of the legislation and much of the policy changes that we've been working through at pace. So it's not, I'm not presenting here just about Best Start for Life. This just shows you how many other things are changing, and Best Start in Life underpins and relates to all of these. So there's a kind of real task at hand in terms of ensuring that all this work is complementary and all works together. An example of that would be we've been aware of the NHS 10-year plan included within it aspirations around neighbourhood health framework, including aspirations around multidisciplinary teams. Now that was going to relate to some of our work in family hubs, but the guidance was released today. So we're then we're working at pace with our colleagues in health to ensure we're doing that in a joined up way. And similarly, we've got the work on SEND transformation from the schools white paper. The planning for that is now underway, but we've had to publish our plan around Best Start in Life by the end of March. So there's a lot of fast manoeuvring going on to ensure that these things remain abreast of each other. Added to which, we've got a local Pan Berkshire Neurodiversity Transformation Programme, which again has a bearing on what we're doing in our family hubs. So there's a huge amount of activity underway at the moment. I'm starting up the kind of policy, and I'll drill down sort of as I go through the presentation. So the Best Start Local Plan effectively is our delivery plan for our Best Start in Life strategy, which was approved by Executive in January. This sets out what we're actually going to do, the activity around that, but also it complements our Helping Early strategy. So this brings together a range of local strategic documentation that we've been publishing in the last year or so. It aims to provide holistic early childhood support, bringing together health, education, and that wider raft of family support, particularly including our voluntary sector partners too. We're really trying to build those links in with our voluntary and faith sector locally, because they provide so many valuable support services for families. So this is a really, really joined up way of working. Again, in terms of that rising demand for child protection, for example, this is about our focus on prevention and early intervention, ensuring we identify families in need at an early stage, and ensuring we get alongside those families and really avert any escalation and really work with them to address the needs at an early stage as possible. I've highlighted in the other alignment of local and national strategies. This is a major thing. Keeping up with the pace of change and the pace of development is a task in itself. And all these things are complementary and all pulled together, but ensuring we do that is quite a task. And the local plan that I'm presenting tonight will undoubtedly be changing. I mean, it'll be iterative. It will change again in the coming months because so much change is coming our way. I'd also tonight cover governance and accountability. Clearly, in that multi-agency forum, accountability, holding each other to account across the system as a whole, is a real key requirement for this to be successful. And I'll cover in a moment how we're achieving that locally. So I believe it will have come here previously, but I wasn't here when it did. But this is just to highlight this all is framed around our Best Start in Life strategy. That's just to give you a sort of visual of what it looked like. I recommend a look at that document. It's a really, really, really nice, easy to read strategy, and really sets out the kind of headlines in terms of what we're trying to achieve. Broadly speaking, there's a little more detail in the written report, but the headlines are the main priorities around us implementing our family hubs. We've started what we're calling a soft launch of those, particularly around Ambleside. That's the Ambleside Centre in Woodley. But we're starting to launch and roll out this programme more widely over the coming months, and over the next year we'll see that extend to the Bramble. It's built around our existing children's centre infrastructure. So the Brambles in Woking, for those of you who know it, and the Red Kite Centre will become our three main hubs. I'll show a map of that in a moment. But that is particularly our focus for development at the moment. We're particularly keen and will be really ramping up parent volunteering and really building on that peer-to-peer support. We recognise that for some families, receiving support from peers who understand their situation and can relate to them with language they understand and can relate to is a real critical element of success. We have some really great examples of volunteering already in the borough through the Home Start, and our breastfeeding network is a voluntary model. We're really wanting to build that up and ensure that our local hubs are really active and busy places with families there alongside us, helping, delivering and supporting each other. The main focus around a lot of this activity is about readiness for school success. So there's a huge piece of work underway with our early years sector. We already have we're fairly high achieving as a borough. We get 77% of our children achieve a good level of development already. But what we're particularly focusing on now is those children who don't achieve that, and really thinking about what the characteristics are and what the barriers are facing some families that mean their children don't progress as fast. And if they arrive at school behind their peers, in many cases they won't. They're already on losing wicket. So we really want to make sure every child gets into school with the same good levels of development and good levels of readiness for sort of really flourishing in school. I can go into more detail, but this report really is in the context of that. I'd welcome the chance to come back and talk you through some of that activity. We're ramping up our parental engagement, support and outreach, particularly looking at evidence-based approaches in terms of parental advice and support. We already have some of those in place, but we're ramping up and increasing our delivery around those support offers. And for all of this to work and to really bind this together in a really cohesive way, we're working very closely across both within the council, but also with our partner agencies in health, that multi-agency support and workforce development, ensuring we're all on the same page in terms of the approaches we use and pulling together and working closely together. We've already the plan that you've got tonight has been through a really big co-production process. So it has been an extensive co-production with parents, practitioners, health partners, and community groups. So this is a joint effort. Co-production is central to our ways of working. I think unless we have that engagement, I think the plan will not be as fully impactful as it could be. And again, just emphasising that multi-agency collaboration and that we've got joined up governance. I'll come on to the governance now, if I may. We have established a Best Start steering group, which again is multi-agency. I know we have lots of these groups, but this is a really it's been a really, we only had 2 of the meetings. We had the second one yesterday, but really positive engagement. Lots of agencies are really keen to be involved in this way of developing these ways of working together. And there's a positive buzz around this piece of work because so many, from families as well as practitioners, people want to work together in this joined up way. That steering group reports into the Children and Young People's Partnerships. That gives it that multi-agency oversight and perspective. And we are developing our data dashboards. I think we recognise data and use of data in the early years. It remains under development. We have some issues around data sharing locally, some challenges around data sharing locally, which we are working through with partners. We don't do that on a customary basis, on a regular basis, and it will enable us to target need much more accurately and much more rapidly if we get better at that. But that is certainly an area for development that we're focusing on. I hope this may have come here previously, but this is we're following the Adult Services and Community and Partnerships Directorate neighbourhood approach. So 3 neighbourhood model with Woodley in the north, Wokingham in the south, Early in the west. We have, broadly speaking, 3 main hubs. I've already mentioned those: Ambleside, the Brambles, and Medkite. These are all currently badged as children's centres, but we'll be rebranding these as Best Start Family Hubs as per government guidance. And we have those the 3 other sites will remain satellite sites, so we won't have staff based there permanently, but we'll use them as sites for delivery. But there'll be delivery through a range of other venues and schools and other partners too. So this is more about as much about ways of working as it is about particular buildings. It's also worth mentioning we are exploring plans to develop a centre of excellence for SEND. Some of our specialist teams we're aiming to relocate those together to give us that real concentration of expertise in one venue. But that we are facing some barriers around that at the moment. We will come back to you with more details as that progresses. So this gives you a sort of headlines in terms of dates and the where we are on the pathway. The Best Start strategy, as I say, was launched and published back in January. The local plan we are on course to publish by the end of March. The steering group, the Best Start steering group, had its second meeting yesterday. That's now finding its feet and becoming better established. It's worth also highlighting, as part of this work, we're pulling together a new service within Children's Services, which is our Best Start in Life and Family Hubs, a new head of service and a new structure, pulling together the Family Hubs teams as they will be together alongside our early years teams. So currently within education, it's really quite a cross-directorate way, not cross-directorate, but bringing some of those teams together so they have a shared head of service and a shared focus, which I think historically has sometimes been lost. I think lost some of that focus and drive because it hasn't been brought together. But that's the decision that's been reached, and we are moving towards putting those teams together. The new Family Hubs workforce won't be fully implemented until July 2026 because we're immersed, as you know, in that wider staff consultation around the new structures alongside the Families First work. So this is part of that broader restructure in Children's Services. And as I've said already, I think SEND delivery will be one of the core components of this. We know special education needs and disabilities and having early access to support and help for families is really going to help us. And that also aligns to the work underway around the SEND local plan nationally. But again, that'll feature in both documents. And there'll be more funding to follow in terms of having that expertise within the hubs. We're waiting to see exactly how much that looks like and we have options about how we'll implement that, but those are yet to be determined. I think Prue mentioned earlier, we had our first launch event on Saturday, just gone, Saturday the 14th, at Ambleside and Woodley. We had a really, I mean, I wasn't there myself, but we had a fantastic turnout. 82 people came through the door. We had 15 of our staff who gave up their Saturday morning to come and work on that, and really positive feedback from everyone involved, and just really good diverse range of people there. Lots of dads came through the door, which is really, we want to make sure we reach out and engage dads in this program. It's really important that they don't feel like bystanders in this, that they're seen as sort of really central to that family support offer. And as I say, I mean, just wanted to share some pictures from the event. These are going out to help us publicise and launch the other centres. There's another of these events on Saturday to come, Saturday the 21st. And we used that event to launch a new survey we're doing for parents and carers, which is live now on the council's Engage hub, really seeking views from families about what they want from these hubs going forward. We need to make sure we're reflecting local need, understanding local need, and getting under the skin of that. So we're out there at the moment in terms of building up that market research, if you like, in terms of what our families want to see from these settings, and already off to a good start. But will be that engagement piece will be going on now over the summer as we roll out a number of events and the further launch events and open days and so on in the coming months to help inform the programme as we move forward. So I thought that was better than the report gives the basis, but I thought it'd be useful to sort of bring some of that to life for you. So happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Jonathan. That was a really good overview. Have we got questions for Jonathan? Moses? Yeah. Moses?
Yeah. Thanks. So the plan presentation you made highlights 24% GLD gap and for children eligible for free school meals and low uptake of supported 2-year entitlement. I just want to know, what are the targeted interventions that you're going to prioritize to ensure that disadvantaged families are not disadvantaged?
There are a number of we're being offered a range of evidence-based interventions. We're currently considering which in particular we'll be commissioning. But most importantly, our early years team are working across the private, voluntary and independent sector, so our private settings, alongside schools. We've had something of a separate offer to the two sectors, if you like. And schools have been in one camp and our private settings in the other. We're working much more closely together, have an integrated support offer for those schools. We are targeting schools and settings where there's a lower level of achievement, so we know we can focus that energy and resource into those settings. That it may not be a reflection on the quality of what they offer, it may be a reflection of the communities they serve, but nonetheless, that's where we're going to focus our efforts and energy, providing simple tools for the families themselves to use to understand what the early years foundation stage offer is, to engage families in that learning process. We'll be ramping that up in terms of taking resources and ideas and thoughts about play in the home environment, ensuring books are in the home environment, and really stepping up that support. So what happens at home is reflected and supported by what's happening in those settings. In terms of the take up of the 2-year-old offer, I think again we are really going through the data in terms of understanding what the barriers are for some communities who are not accessing that offer. There are a number of reasons. We are still, I think, immersed in and understanding that a little better. I think there's more to discover in terms of what those barriers may be, and I'd really welcome the chance to come back to you with a bit more detail. A lot of work is happening at the moment, and I think I'll only be able to give you a partial reply on that. So I'd welcome the chance to come back and give you more detail in terms of our stepping up our awareness, our data analysis, and therefore what follows from that is the targeting for some of those families who may need more support.
Thank you, Jonathan. Just mentioned about 2-year-old uptake, which I think we do realize that which can improve more. The early year team now already make the priority action to find out more why. I think they do a lot of publicity to promote to government's free placement scheme, but take up can be higher. So we realize that we can report back once we find out more reason and what kind of action we're going to put in place to improve the 2-year-old play. Can be, I think we just have some assumption. I don't want to set assumption here. The perception, our nursery, our childcare placement, somehow the family think it will be better than look after the children itself. Because we will find out more.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you do develop the Best Start dashboard, I presume you will have some KPIs. So will you break them down into effort, free school meals, SEND, English as additional language, and care experience, so we can see whether the inequalities are narrowing?
So there is already some data in relation to the Health and Wellbeing Board that looks at little ones' progress and the progress that we're making in terms of good level of development. And in the last 18 months, we've been able to drive up across all of our population of children, a 2% rise in good level of development. So we know that broadly we've got one of the best offers in the country. We are top in the country in terms of what's regarded as an oasis for childcare, and that's been noted by Ofsted in terms of sufficiency of childcare places. In the strategy, there are some outcome measures that we will report back on in relation to the progress of the strategy, because this is absolutely fundamental. And what we need to make sure is that every child has the opportunity to thrive in Wokingham. And we know that the gap between those that do and those that don't is too wide. And so I think a lot of what the work and what Jonathan was saying is really understanding and not making any assumptions about why that might be, but really working with those families to think about actually how would the offer work better for them. Because there's clearly maybe something not currently working, which is why we've got some of those differentials between different communities, different genders, kind of different places in the borough. So really wanting to understand that better so that we can really target, because there's some really good evidence-based programmes and interventions that we can bring into the borough to really help and support that. It's worth saying that we were selected, we bid for part of the foundation's What Works to be one of the 9 regions in the country, and we were selected as the region to represent the South East in terms of a recruitment of a local evidence lead, and she came into post I think last Monday, didn't she?
That's right.
And so what the part of her role is, it's a 12-month programme that's linked to that national community of practice that is learning about what works in different areas, and then how we contextualise that to what works in Wokingham and for Wokingham families. So it's all about not necessarily, I think, acknowledging, there's lots of good evidence. There's lots of good evidence from the states around what works to support children's development, but it doesn't always translate. And so what we need to get better at as a local authority is around being able to make that relevant on what work, and we need to be in relationship with our families and really understanding our children to be able to do that. And I think we are a really, with the development of the family hubs, the trust, faith and confidence that's been shown in us in terms of us being selected to be one of 9 local authorities in the country, and us representing the South East. And that's particularly because our early years offer more generally is seen to be very good. But what we do recognise, we can't be complacent. There is more for us to do, particularly in terms of addressing some of the inequity in the borough. That's a real priority.
Thanks, Emma. Mary-Louise?
Thank you. That's covered most of quite a lot of what I was going to ask, but I am contractually obliged as an anthropologist to push for the acknowledgement that, like, you know, a good level of development is like, it's an outcome, it's a process, you know, rather than an outcome. And my concern, which, you know, I know that you share, but how are you going to mitigate against the problem comes when you have such pressure to push the number of children over, to push the percentage of children up. What happens is that you then focus on the threshold. Yeah, you focus on the children that are closest to attaining that. And how are you going to mitigate against that pressure? Because, you know, we know that pressure exists within the system. So, and it can, you know, have, so I would be interested to know how you're going to address that.
I think those children, so there are those children that might be close to the threshold that require a little bit more of a leg up in terms of support to get them over that threshold. But equally, it is absolutely key. And I think this is where we were speaking about earlier about how we make sure that, that our Best Start in Life Family Hub delivery plan links with our local area SEND reform plan, because this is about elevating and getting really accurate measures in relation to all children in terms of need. And what we do know through some of the tracking is that for some of our most vulnerable children, those might be the children who then become open to children's social care and require higher levels of intervention in terms of that family network, that family support, not readily being in place. So we already, and I can give an example, so for our under fives who are children we care for, so in our care, our virtual school has been given being given additional support around for phonics, and all of those children that are within that that cohort have achieved their targets in relation because of that additional support. The virtual school holds a statutory responsibility in relation to not just children we care for, but also children in need and children subject to a child protection plan. And that's one of the areas that we're looking to develop. We're also developing our kinship local offer. So those children who might have previously had a social worker and becoming much more aware as a system as to where they are and the support, working with our schools, working with providers in relation to the system being much more aware of those children's needs and those families' needs, and making sure that the aunties and uncles, nans and granddads who are caring for those children know where to go for additional support as those children might reach developmental milestones and different things bubble up from their histories that get in the you know, that can impact on the way in which they learn. So there is a lot happening in terms of the development of our offer, but it isn't just focusing on those children that we might easily tip over. It's the full spectrum that we are investing in.
Okay. More questions? None
I have one question.
Okay, Chetna, thank you.
So my question is that how will the Best Start in Life strategy address inequalities in access to early years support, particularly for families facing barriers such as transport cost or lack of information?
Shall I come in, Emma?
Yeah, do you want to cover that?
Oh, I mean, I think the thing to say, Chetna, is at this stage we are still working with our families to really get under the skin of what those barriers are. We make some broad assumptions about what they may be, but in terms of remedies for them, that's something we're going to be co-producing with those families. And I think this focus, particularly focus on disadvantage, is perhaps it's something we're certainly zooming in on and focusing on more than we have previously and historically. And I think we're more resource dedicated to this. So I think in terms of those narratives, in terms of that understanding of what the barriers may be and then what we may do about them, I wouldn't want to, I think at the moment I can give you a partial answer, but I'd rather much sooner come back to you once we have a more fully fledged development plan. I mean, we are looking at best practice from a number of other areas. There's some strong evidence just been published this week from Camden, for example, in terms of actually identifying low-income families and giving them a grant at the stage of birth. There are some very straightforward remedies we may want to look into or adopt. That's proved very, very effective in Camden. But at this stage, we are considering our options and really, more importantly, I think at this stage, really getting to the nuance of understanding what the barriers to access may be for some families. Understanding the needs of different communities is also part of our offer. We're really pleased on Saturday, so we had a really good diverse range of families arrived at the centre, and we're really keen on more activity and more reasons to engage. So we're off to a good start, but it is at an early stage, I will say that.
Thank you.
Oh, just one of the things to add.
Yes.
So we are currently in the process of pulling together a children's joint strategic needs analysis. And this is taking data and information from, I think it's about 50 different sources that is being pulled together, and disproportionality and understanding where children are underrepresented and overrepresented, and families is a key part of that analysis, Chetna, and the outcome of that. So that work is happening at the moment. We'll have a working draft by the end of March, and then further kind of iterative. And we're working with the Institute of Health Equity to develop that. But it will mean that we have a public-facing document that gives a real snapshot of the daily lived experiences of children in the borough, and everything from breastfeeding uptake to the needs of children who are subject to child protection plans, and linking that with children who have additional needs and our autism rates. So really being able to get a comprehensive baseline of what it's like to be a child in Wokingham, and that will give us, those insights will really help us with our decision making about where we're reaching and where we're not, and we are, I think, we are engaging. I'm hoping, and that we haven't got our parent carer forum here with us this evening, but I think what they would reflect back is the importance of engaging with our children and our families, and listening to their voices, as well as and matching that with the data, so that we get a really rich understanding, and then that is going to improve where we put our resources and how we support families better. And that's children and families from all different communities in the borough is really, really key for us.
Thank you very much. I just have one more question. So I just want to know is how will the strategy ensure that family hubs and family help teams have sufficient workforce capacity given current recruitment challenges and reliance on temporary staff?
I think that's a fair question. I think just from the feedback that I got from the 15 people that turned up on Saturday to welcome families, there is a lot of enthusiasm within the workforce. The same enthusiasm that we saw amongst families for being supported in a different way, we are seeing in our workforce in terms of being able to be allowed to support families in in a way that matches their skills and offers and takes support and offers support in families, communities, is really, really key. So I think there is what we need to make sure, and that's one of the things that is part of our programme of work, is that we've got a really good training and development offer, and that we are attending to the skills of our workforce. But what we know from, and I know from having implemented family hubs within a London borough, was that actually the family hubs themselves and those opportunities for employment were a key part of community wealth building, because part of the programme of the work with the family hubs is that we will be looking at recruiting parent volunteers as that pathway back into work. And what we do know is that we will have roles, so family hub navigator roles, and actually having people in those roles who are from the local community and represent the local community is really, really key. And you can see from previous reports, so we're offering not just apprenticeships for care leavers and roles for care leavers, but apprenticeships moving into social work. So you could become a family hub, you could be a parent volunteer, you could get a job as and apply for a role in terms of a family navigator. You're part of our community of practice, and then there's the opportunity, potentially, if you wanted to for us to support you with an apprenticeship into a qualification like social work. So looking at this as part of an approach to community wealth building as well.
Thank you very much for the reply. I just have one last question. I don't want to overburden you. That giving the rising number of children with complex needs and increasing EHCP demand, how will the strategy ensure that early year settings are equipped to support inclusion effectively?
Well, we have a local area SEND reform plan that's going to hold our feet to fire to make sure that we are doing that, and that we are making sure that a big part of the national agenda is having more inclusive educational provision, and that's within the early years through to primary and secondary. You'll be aware, and Gillian may refer to when we get on to the schools update, about the new inspection regime that's coming to schools that is looking at how inclusive schools are, how well are they doing at supporting the communities that they have, not the communities that they want, is really, really key. So so Ofsted will be holding settings and educational settings to account, and we're part of we work with our schools as part of our education partnership, and our schools are really at the heart of wanting to deliver more inclusive support for children across the board. So that's really heartening to see.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chetna. Andy.
Thank you. This is a very good program. It's helping many families and parents. And I want to know that what is the led composition of the participant, and how can we increase the diversity of this program so that the different immigrants, for example, the Hong Kong communities is moving from Hong Kong to Workingham in just short time, a few years, and many of the parents may not know don't know how to find the information and find the help for their kid.
What was lovely to see on Saturday, myself and Ming were there. We weren't one of the 15, I don't think, we weren't classed as that, but we were certainly there on Saturday morning, was the diversity of the families who were coming through the door, and I think making sure that those hubs are welcoming spaces for all is really, really key. What we are, so our department is also responsible for adult education and the adult education programme. And as we develop our family hubs, what we want to do is try to bring those different strands together. So there might be an English language speaking group, you know, in terms of learning and conversational English group, while your children get to play in a creche. And there were lots of dads there on Saturday morning, which was great to see. And I think one of the bits of feedback that we got from the families who were attending, so they told us not much happens in Woodley on a Friday. So could we think about, you know, kind of activities or programmes on a Friday? Families fed back, actually it'd be really good if there was potentially a dad's group on a Saturday. So, you know, kind of dads get to connect with each other. And I think we heard from families who have moved into Wokingham for work, and those having those opportunities to meet one another, connect with one another, and reduce loneliness. It can be really lonely when you've just had a new baby, and your world kind of turns upside down, and you get to 5 o'clock and you're still in your pajamas, and think, where has the day gone? And I've just got this little thing to care for. But having other parents to connect to who've had similar experiences and to be able to support each other is really, really key. So that's part of the ethos of the hubs.
I think we can, and maybe can to promote the program to the different communities, for example,
Yes.
Hong Kong, and the Hong Kong communities have set up some CIC, and maybe already is connecting with the Wokingham Borough Council with another activities and programs. Then we can make all the connection together.
Definitely.
And we can promote in their maybe social media or their WhatsApp group, and
So,
this will be wonderful.
Yeah, so we have been making some films with our care leavers, TikTok style films, because apparently that's the kind of, you know, in terms of being able to communicate with families. And we are, if that is successful and we think that has worked, that's something that we're thinking about extending about the family hubs and the programme as we develop the programmes, so that we can exactly that, we can broadcast on social media in terms of what's available.
Just a little more tips, and if for Hong Kong communities move to UK, most of Hong Kongers don't like TikTok. They like Facebook and Instagram.
It's not on TikTok.
Yeah.
It's TikTok style.
So don't only just TikTok.
Yeah.
May I just mention as well, we have the final slide in my presentation has a QR code on it. I would really welcome if members could help us by getting those flyers out right across the community. We really want to learn from you know, every corner of Woking what kind of services families are looking for, what kind of support they're looking for, and also that will enable us to get back in contact with families. So we really want to promote this over the next few months to really get to understand the needs across the borough, and also to make contact and have those contact details for families that we can then engage in their local hubs. So I'll circulate those with the papers for this meeting, and if you can promote them in any which way possible, I would be very grateful.
About to say the same, Councillor. I think any community gathering or opportunity, we're quite happy to go there. On such amazing, I thought two Hong Kong sort of family, the kids just say Cantonese to me. They immediately make the connection. So lovely. Yeah, I can see the sensitivity of TikTok. I know, probably, I know what you mean. Yeah, not one, yeah.
I did stress TikTok style. But there is there is a second Saturday morning, open morning this Saturday in the Ambleside Centre. There is the opportunity to share that with families, to share that information, and to get families along so that they can meet each other, we can meet them, and we can learn more about what it is that they want.
Okay. Sorry, I just had a couple of questions. It's an amazing and vast piece of work, which has been really well articulated. I was concerned, though, when I saw that there are 11 objectives, which feels like an awful lot to manage. So I guess it's a well-being question around how it's going to be managed, avoiding burnout, trying to cover so much.
Do you want
I mean, I think, well, I don't mind it, I can. I mean, I think there's a lot to do, undoubtedly, a huge amount to do. But what I'd say is, though, is that what's really, really exciting, frankly, is that the energy within our staff team is to get cracking on this. There's a real appetite to get stuck in, to develop these centres, to link, to engage with local communities in a different way than has been possible previously, and to also generate that impetus where we're getting communities themselves getting involved in some of the delivery. We've got some. I've got those plans. I've really welcome the chance to come back here and talk about some of our sort of community development and parental ways of involving parents in some of that peer support. We've got some plans in mind. I haven't gone into that detail today, but it's going to be achieved by sharing the load and by making this a partnership approach that we all do together. And also particularly again with our voluntary sector partners, we're really engaging with our voluntary sector. So there's lots of enthused, energized and motivated people out there who really want to make this program work. And I think yes, there's a lot to do, but one step at a time. It's going to be done through one step at a time. I think we recognise it can't land fully fledged. This will take time to really build up and develop. And if it's going to reflect the needs of local communities, it has to be an organic process.
Jonathan, rest assured, I've already made a note that you're on a future agenda, so you will be back. And then just one other thing, on the delivery plan, 26 to 28, there's a lot of mentions of percentage increases. Some have numbers, some don't. I often think having a number focuses the mind. Is there a reason some do and some don't, or are they a work in progress?
So they're all a work in progress. We have, I mean, as I referenced earlier, we have still got some persistent data sharing challenges, and I want to nail those down. No, we can get I don't want to set us objectives we cannot achieve because we can't get the data. We're looking at other options and mitigation for gaps in our data. And again, it's a work in progress. I'll be able to come back to you in due course with a much more fully fledged and worked through model. We started out with a list of our wished for KPIs, and some of that might need to be rationalised depending on what we can get on a regular and reliable basis.
Okay, that's great. So a massive thank you on behalf of the group. It's been a really interesting and useful presentation, and we look forward to hearing from you again.
Thank you.
And Jo has timed her entry to perfection because you are next on the agenda. So I shall hand over to you.
I'm here to share an annual update on the activity of the Youth Council. So I'm not going to read through all the slides. I know you've had them in advance, but I've just kind of broken it down month by month to share something about the priorities on that month for our meetings. We have anything between, I think, in exam season, the attendance will go down. So sometimes there might be sort of 8 or 9 young people. The most we've had in a meeting is 20. In the last year, but we are open to anybody. They don't have to apply to join the Youth Council. So any secondary school age young person in Wokingham can join, and we've got a good variety of different schools represented. We've got children, young people who have special educational needs and disabilities. We've got people who are educated other than at school, people who go to specialist schools. So they are quite a varied group of young people. I've tried to, on each slide, put some of their thoughts as well. I asked them, what it means to them to be part of the Youth Council and what they have personally sort of got out of it and what they feel the Youth Council has achieved as well. So I've put some of those thoughts on every slide. I think what came out of it when I was having those conversations with people is just the building in confidence that it's given some of our young people, and people who said, I used to be scared to put my hand up in class and I would never have spoken in a big group of people, and now because of the support of the other members of the Youth Council and their confidence has grown, and that that's affected not just them in contributing to the Youth Council but in all areas of their life as well. So that was really, really lovely to hear. And I think on that first slide, the example of, I've really learnt about other people's feelings, and sometimes things do get brought up, that another member of the Youth Council might challenge or might say, actually, that's affected me personally. And they are able to kind of, sort of speak to each other in a way about quite, important and difficult topics, guided obviously by myself and my participation officer, Anna. So it is about giving their voice to some of our strategies and our really important decisions which get brought to the Youth Council, but it's also a forum where they get to develop themselves and learn and grow through their involvement as well. We've kind of had in the last year, two of the Youth Council members wanted to, one of their aims for the year was to open up new opportunities for young people and interesting things for young people to do. So, they're kind of very aware that people are kind of locked on their phones, scrolling, being in front of a computer screen, and they want to give opportunities for activities and interesting things for other young people. So that was where the debate nights came from. That they had that interest in debating topics of the day, and some of their debate topics have been the things that our parliamentary colleagues are struggling with. They don't shy away from the big topics. And also the Youth Politics Night, which we held in December, and that's been an annual event for the last 4 years that they really, really enjoy planning that, getting the invites out, hosting it, asking the questions, getting questions from other young people and posing them to our politicians. So I will talk a little bit more about that because I've got a slide about that soon. But again, just kind of some of the things they fed into. The Community Safety Action Plan was one of our recent topics. We've worked with our NHS colleagues, with our colleagues in public health, and some of our political members as well. And a new opportunity which they've just started to explore is a book group. So we had our first book group on World Book Day, and I don't know if anyone's heard of the author Annalise Avery. She wasn't familiar to me, but I think she's quite a well-known, well-regarded author. So for sort of 12 to 16-year-olds. So she came along and did like a question answer session online with some of the really keen readers who go to the group in the library as well. And I found it absolutely fascinating, actually, what she said, how she goes about writing a book, how she develops her stories, and the young people found that quite inspiring, I think, in terms of writing their own stories as well. So I've put some of the outcomes on a couple of slides there. You can see some of the work that they've done, and some of the kind of the way that they amplify and advocate for other young people as well. Just focusing on a couple of their kind of big projects, which I mentioned earlier, the Youth Politics Night. We had an opening ballot and a closing ballot. So we asked young people when they came in for their political preference. And then we asked them again on the way out to see if it had made a difference, who was most influential. And the Youth Council were really, really encouraged, I think, to see the results, because on the way in, there was, I think it was either 10 or 11 young people who said they had I think it was 10 who had no preference and 1 undecided. And on the way out, they actually all had a preference. So, that was great to see that it had, it encouraged some clearer political thinking in our young people. And I think Stephen Conway said, some of these questions are trickier than the questions that I get asked when I when I come along to speak with adults. So again, they're not scared to ask the challenging questions. And for them organising that event as well, there was a lot that went into it. So people were able to take on different roles. We had one of our young people who does often struggle to regulate himself, I have to say, in the Youth Council and I think in school, who was our speaker for the evening. So he had the gavel and the power in the council chamber, and he absolutely loved it. And I kind of sat next to him just in case there was any incidents of, but he had a stopwatch. He kept everyone to time. He did not let even our MPs go a second over their allocated time that they had to answer their questions. So I think he could be a future speaker. And when we were talking about highlights, that was his highlight of the year. He said, not just in the Youth Council, in my whole year, being able to do that was absolutely brilliant for him. We've got our members of Youth Parliament. So we have our outgoing MP, Youth MP Maya, who's a student at Holt School. And she has also been chosen to be part of the Youth Select Committee. So that's a really great honour. She's up regularly in the House of Parliament. Their bill, which they have going through, is about PSHE education, and really looking at making that really, really meaningful. So she's been able to get feedback from young people, not just in the Youth Council, but across Wokingham, take that up and really kind of make a difference there with her work that she's been doing. And then we've got 2 new youth MPs because Wokingham's population has grown. We're now allowed to have 2 rather than 1. So we have Lima and we have Jasmine, and we've met with them a couple of times so far. They are so passionate, and they've got 2-year tenure to really make a difference. Their manifestos were outstanding, and we had the election of the youth MPs in the council chamber, so schools were putting forward a representative, and these 2 were voted in. So they will be co-chairing the Youth Council, and they've already been, met Yuan, they're meeting with Clive, they're meeting with Prue, I think, this week. I think Prue's online, so hopefully she's expecting to meet with them. And they're very passionate about mental health. They're very, very passionate about skills and volunteering, jobs. So we're building a programme for the coming year in the Youth Council where they're going to be really bringing those topics to the forefront. And one of my asks from the members here is that, if you are the lead member on a panel or a board, and we may well be coming to you to come and hear from our Youth Council, they want to get involved in things as well. So they want to be part of some of the meetings, the decision making. They're really, really keen. So yeah, transport is another biggie that they want to get involved in. So yes, if we approach any of you or any of your colleagues, please do consider coming to meet with us and to hear from the voice of young people in Wokingham. I mentioned our debate nights earlier, so this is a way of really extending out beyond our youth council members and involving other young people from across the borough. It's entirely youth-led. Will and Kasim do an amazing job. I have been roped in to be a judge, which I've never even been to a debate competition before. I was asked to judge one, so I had to do some quite speedy research into what I might need to be looking out for. But they really get into it, and there's some schools who've come back every single time, and you can see their skills developing and how confident they're getting in public speaking, and they also support each other really well as well. That's been one of the highlights for me. Is if somebody, I think we had a school who couldn't come at the last minute, and people stepped up to volunteer to take part in a debate that they hadn't done any research on. They just wanted to have a go and give it a try. And then plans for 2026. When we put this together with the Youth Council, we were still finalising our plans. So this was some of their ideas, but this isn't exclusive. We are still working with the youth MPs on what they want to kind of bring to the coming 2 years of their term. But yeah, we're not a political body. We're not affiliated with any political party, although we do have members who are passionate members of other political parties, but we don't really discuss politics. We might discuss issues, but we're not we're not campaigning for certain parties. So some of our members want to kind of look at other activities, and that's where the book club came in, that kind of education, reading focus as well. Website improvements, we know there's lots of work going on to look at the Wokingham Borough Council information on the website, but particularly on the Youth Council pages, they want to have a more attractive offer and talk about some of the things that they're doing. They're really interested in volunteering and work experience, and it can be really difficult for them to get volunteering opportunities. So several of them we've invited along. I can't remember the lady's name, but the Wokingham Volunteering Centre person. Anyway, she's coming along to a meeting to talk more about those opportunities, but we also want to look at doing some group volunteering. So perhaps as a youth council, we go out and we do a session at the cowshed, kind of making up bags. So we kind of, we do something together as well. They want to work on campaigns, so they're still working out what those might be, but really kind of focusing on one or two things that they want to make a difference to. Mental health and wellbeing, I mentioned, and the skills strategy. And then again, talking about doing that volunteering, choosing a charity that they want to support, a local charity, and giving something back to the community as well. So I think that's the last slide. Yeah, I will stop sharing. Thank you, Jane.
Thanks, Jo. Any questions for Jo? Moses?
That's good, Joe. Thanks. Is the Youth Council open to all schools in Wokingham Borough?
Yep, so all schools and people who live in Wokingham. So we do have some members who attend schools outside of Wokingham but live in Wokingham. So yeah, anybody who lives or studies here. Or people who don't go to school but live in Wokingham.
Any more questions? Any online? I just wanted to say it's really heartwarming to see youth getting involved, and let's take party politics out of it. I would rather a young person has an affiliation to something than nothing. So to see those shifts, I think, was really powerful. And I think a lot of adults could learn from that. And that said, I like the fact that you're expanding the remit beyond politics, because there's so many skills that can be developed beyond politics through that forum. So it's great. Sorry, Andy, I missed you wanting a question.
I think, and this is very good and very valuable. And because and I know some people maybe don't like council, don't like the government, but I say that if don't like the council and don't like government, then you should participate and go to change it, make it better in the future. And so this is a very good foundation for encourage the people to raise the concern, because I know that if more people concern better, then even the politics or the policies will also be changing. And for example, especially, but this is the Generation C, the age of, and they are very powerful. They will think out of the box, and they have no burden. They are also their social media. The AI is better than us, and especially they are the future. The future belongs to them. And maybe just 10 years later, some councillor is in. Today is in the chamber in your activities, and I just want to and how to promote more really is, and also because this is experience how democracy is working, and it's a very valuable chance and only happen in the democracy country like UK.
In terms of promoting the Youth Council, that's something that our two new youth MPs really want to work on. And because of their position, they do have permission from their schools to take some time out of the school day to work on their activities as part of the members of Youth Parliament. So we are talking about maybe going round to schools and doing a series of assemblies or sessions, education sessions for people on political literacy and the Youth Council, and kind of making that part of the secondary school education across Wokingham. But we're putting together a kind of package that we're going to show to schools and see what they think. But we also want to do more of the community events, and that's something that they haven't done before. So like the May Fair, the pre-Christmas, I can't remember what it's called. Carnival, Winter Carnival, that's it, isn't it? So get out and about in the town a bit more. And I think, doing some of maybe the charity stuff that they want to do as well, we can talk about that. And they do have an Instagram account. So they are working on kind of what they want to share and the messages that they want to put across on their Instagram as well. But it really is led by them, and we're there to support, so that they know how to reach those young people, I think. It's just what we can do to assist them with that.
Another one, Andy? Oh, you done? Another question?
And if and yes, and maybe can, because many activities in Wokingham, many maybe the Ramadan or even Chinese New Year, Lunar New Year, and if the councillors or the young Parliament MP want to make a speech and piece and go to content them and make more experience for them, and also can promote the different communities.
Yeah, definitely. We would welcome that. So I think you've got my contact details. There's an email which is the Youth Voice email, or you can contact me directly. But the MYPs also have their own email accounts as well, so they can be contacted by young people or by members who want to invite them along. And I think some of those things that the town council does would be really ideal for one of the members of Youth Parliament to come along and just kind of do a bit of a open surgery, maybe like some of the MPs do a drop in and see what the issues of the day are for young people.
I do. It's absolutely great to see this happening. As these kinds of things mature, what helps them along is teeth and tasks, like having some power and something to do. So is there any way that we could look at engaging this group of young people in, say, evaluation of our services? Yeah, because, for example, we've spoken about mental health. We know that there are major issues around access, so on and so forth. Might it be worth, both as, a learning for us and a learning for them, engaging them in actually sort of, critiquing some of the services that they rely on or look at?
Do you mean like a sort of mystery shopper type thing?
No, I would say, you know, there are many, obviously, you know, better now, lots and lots of different ways to do it, but you can talk to the, talk to the young people themselves and say, how do you think we should evaluate? And what things they can call people in, they can talk to, they can ask to. It's just that, as the groups and mature, yes, you want to go out, but you need to have something to carry out to those schools to sort of like demonstrate what it is that we actually do. Yeah. And the impact, what changes, measurable changes. And, we as a council, as members and officers, we have responsibility to demonstrate what we have done differently because of the engagement of these children.
Yeah. Yes, so it's literally what I was just about to say. So Hayley's hovering over her button. Hayley's team and I are just working on developing a project at the moment called Young Inspectors. So as outside of the Youth Council, I have lots of other participation strands going on. And one of those is we have 3 young experts who are care experienced young people who actually work as part of my team on part-time contracts, and we're developing a kind of pro forma where they will be going out and evaluating services, but also talking to young people who live or use those services. So with that idea that young people will probably share a lot more with another young person than they would with, if Hayley or some, not that you'd be doing the inspection, Hayley, but if one of your team was to go out. So I definitely think that evaluation is really useful. But what we're doing with these particular young people, because we have more time with them, we're going to train them really effectively. They're part of developing that as well. And so they're really kind of involved from the beginning. So yes, I think the Youth Council possibly, when we've done this pilot and we've looked at it, maybe we could do, that it wouldn't be suitable for the services that we're thinking of going into, but there may be other things that we're like, okay, this would be, we could kind of extend it, but we wouldn't want to just throw them in to go and look at something, and we'd probably need to pay them for it as well. Yeah, it'd be quite time consuming. Yeah.
We know that transport is a major issue, access to transport, how to use it and so on. So, it doesn't have to be at the sort of cutting edge of the most services. It's more that we demonstrate that we, we operationalise, we make this work, and then that we take on board, we're prepared to put our money where our mouth is in terms of making changes because of the impact.
Chetna?
Hi, thank you for the brilliant presentation on the Youth Council and the activity that the Youth Council is doing. I think it's very nice to see it. I just have one question on regarding the Youth Council. So I just want to know is how does the Youth Council want to be involved in shaping the best start in life and helping early strategies, and what support do you need to make your voices heard effectively?
I have to say that's not something which they have self-identified as a priority for them, but I think we could look at, what do those spaces mean for people of their age? I think perhaps what they see it as is a babies and younger children's area, but we know that that's not how those spaces and those buildings are going to be used. So I think there's definitely something that whether it's Jonathan or somebody from his team wants to talk to them more about to help them kind of understand where we are and what we want to do, and how teenagers might be able to sort of get benefit from those new hubs. They may well be interested in looking at it further.
Okay, I know that that's not one of their their objectives for this year. I just wanted to know because that strategy is being actually worked on. So I just wanted to know what their participation is going to be. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any more questions for Joe? Nope. Thanks a lot for that, Joe. It was great. So we will move on, and I'll hand over to Ming and Gillian.
Thank Chair. We have the more comprehensive report this time to highlight local education development, including school inspection update, including certain aspect of SEN development. We will mention SEN reform early on. Emma can talk about. I will let Julian to talk about the first part of the report first. Julian.
Thanks, Ming. So to give you an update on the inspections, I'll just start with following on Emma's comment earlier and just pick up on that inclusion item. So inclusion is one of the key inspection judgment areas in the new framework. And I think I've been talking about the new framework for a couple of meetings with colleagues now. So that inclusion evaluation area covers a really broad scope. And we might think about inclusion in terms of those who have additional special educational needs, those who are receiving healthcare plans or have a recognised additional need. But actually the inclusion criterion in the new framework includes those children, but also those who are socioeconomically disadvantaged, including those who might be eligible for the pupil premium, those who are known to currently or previously known to children's social care, might be children in need or looked after children, so under the auspices of the virtual school potentially as well, and children who may face other barriers to their learning or their well-being, which may include pupils who share a protected characteristic. So in that final area, we're encouraged to think about the context of the school. And I know some councillors tonight have been talking about the different barriers that community members might face. And that's what schools are invited to respond to in line with the new inclusion judgment area. So if we move on and have a quick look at the reports that we've had published, I did mention to colleagues last meeting that we'd had 2 schools inspected under the new framework. You have the information and the dashboard there for Early St Peter's in the report. So you get a sense now, I think I gave you a mock one previously, and now you can see how a live one looks like. At the time of writing the report, the Forest School report was not published, but I can tell colleagues this evening that that is now published, and that has a strong button, 5 expected buttons and 1 button where they're working on their post-16 provision in further attention. So another positive report for Forest there, and I can make sure that you have the link to that after the meeting. In terms of other work that's going on, we are trying to now support schools continually with the preparation for those inspections and working with schools on workshops, looking at each of those judgment areas and thinking about what the evidence base would look like. And there's a real kind of step change in the documentation that schools might need to be thinking about. So we were talking with His Majesty's inspectors last week and understand that actually we should be thinking about self-evaluation as an activity. It was described as we should be thinking of it as a verb rather than as a noun. So not a huge document, but an activity that's an ongoing practice. In terms of other education priorities, you can see those in the report there. The work on belonging that Emma has talked about in relation to the family hubs, a really core tenet of the inspection framework. And we'll see in a moment that running as a core golden thread through the new white paper, the education white paper. The white paper also picks up on the curriculum and assessment review final report, which you've got referenced in the document there. And you'll see a number of recommendations that schools are going to have to implement by 2028 in terms of new teaching for updated programmes of study against GCSEs, and some other areas in terms of developing oracy, financial and digital skills for children, and some new tests coming on stream, particularly on reading fluency and comprehension for Year 8 children, and Progress 8 options, which we'll see picked up in the white paper as well. So that encouragement of a greater breadth of study for children entering GCSE, with English and maths as the core, plus 2 sciences, and then a choice of 2 further from the arts and 2 further breadth areas for the curriculum. So an increased set of choices for children at GCSE being promoted. If we then have a quick look at the white paper, the school's white paper, Every Child Achieving and Thriving, is a mere 107 pages. It's in 7 chapters in 2 parts. One of those chapters contains part of one of those chapters, I should say, contains the reforms around special educational needs. The other 6 chapters I've outlined for you here, and I just want to draw colleagues' attention to a few of the things so you get a sense of the scale of change that the education system is looking at over the next few years. So you've already heard Jonathan talk about family hubs. They're referenced in the chapter on setting up every child to achieve. So as you can hear, as a borough, we're already a really long way down that journey, and it's how schools will connect into that piece of work. Then there's a section on local accountability in setting up every child to achieve, where the government described partnership as no longer optional across the education system. We already have the Borough Education Partnership in place in the borough, so we're well placed here. But government are going to issue a new model of local partnerships and shared accountability for children's outcomes across communities. And so what we will actually be looking at is a much wider landscape of community coming together, including integrated care boards with police representatives, the local authority and schools and trusts, and wider stakeholders sitting on those partnerships. Then if we think about the chapter around narrow to broad, the themes in here align with the curriculum reforms around the broadening of the offer at GCSE, so you see that in there. Then the development of an oracy framework, which will be coming on stream that schools will have to deliver a curriculum against, linking with some formative assessment for staff to be able to assess in schools children's oracy development. This will link with a writing progress assessment at Year 8. And for secondary children, there will be a combined oracy, reading and writing framework. And there will be a look at the curriculum sequence between Key Stage 2, so the end of primary phase, into the beginning of Key Stage 3, so that's the end of Year 6, into the beginning of Year 7, to think about how that transition can be really made the most effective. And there's a move back to a 3-year Key Stage 3. And we know that many schools nationally have moved to a 2-year Key Stage 3 and were pulling their GCSEs down to start earlier across secondary schools. So some work in replanning the framework of curriculum delivery for some secondary schools. Then there will also be an enrichment framework, which is going to be published by this September for implementation this September. And colleagues, given that we're already approaching the Easter holidays in terms of school workload, that leaves the summer term to get that out and on stream for September. One of the things that the white paper quotes is that as a country, at age 15, our young people have the lowest social and emotional skill sets than any OECD average. So there's a real drive in the white paper to look at that enrichment framework and think about how participation, particularly for our most disadvantaged young people, can be increased and improve those outcomes in social and emotional skills. And then that links through into the inclusion area, which is about withdrawn to engage, noting that there have been differences in that engagement between school and home since the pandemic, and noting that 1 in 5 children miss a day's worth of education in a fortnight, and that 7 out of every 30 minutes in school are lost to disruptive behaviours. So there's a real focus on improving attendance and minimising behavioural disruption in school. So they're going to build on an independent inquiry and looking at what is working well and link that through the common thread of belonging to enable all children to feel that they belong in their community and they belong in their school community, so that they attend well and behave effectively to make the most of their learning. And then we move into support and investment. So there's going to be a recruitment of 6,500 extra teachers. That's going to be at secondary level and post-16, where we have some subject specialism challenges in terms of being able to attract colleagues. A proposal of flexible working across the system, an increase in the use of artificial intelligence, and then some changes around pay negotiations and a support staff recognition, and an investment across the system in special education needs training for all staff, and an increased teacher training entitlement right across the profession. And then we finish it with that collaboration of the ability to move into some form of collaboration. As yet, the DfE haven't set out what those collaborations look like. So we might be thinking of that in terms of an academisation agenda, but actually what we might be thinking is about the schools who are not in trusts coming forward into some kind of structured collaboration. Maybe that's a federation or some other form of trust going forward. And you can see the phases of development set out over the next 3 years, so that that is completed by the end of the duration of this Parliament. And then, colleagues, we move into the educational outcomes review. Do you want me to just pause there, Chair, and take any questions on the white paper?
That would be great, Gillian. Thank you. Any question? Oh, Chris.
Given that's quite a lot, how achievable do we think that actually is in a school? As you know, as a teacher, I'm looking at that and going, that's a lot. You know, is it realistic? You know, how close do we think we're going to get to that?
I think it is a lot, and I'm keen for everybody to understand the pressure that this places on the system. I think there are some smart ways of addressing this in terms of that common thread around belonging. So I think if we were to think about how we might address this in terms of the biggest pins, what are the big hitters in this that will move all the moving parts together most effectively? If we thought about how we are working with our communities and our families and thereby our young people to enable them to feel part of their community, that they belong in school, that they feel valued and welcomed, by having the right curriculum offer, by engaging them in the appropriate activities, then the other things should fall into place around that. But absolutely, it's not to be underestimated the scale of the work to be done over the next 3 years.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, that's a really good question. It's just a huge task, a great ambition for next 10 years. I attended a conference last Monday with Secretary of State there, and then very much people raise that question. In the southeast area, in the near future, we talk about in like 12 months, 24 months, that ambition linked to another program called RISE program. And the government ambition is RISE program will focus on 4 area priorities to deliver. We talk about best start in life, and the language of that focus, they call reception quality outcomes that link to best start in life. Another area, very tangible area, is school attendance, particularly the one who are from disadvantaged and vulnerable group, lay attendance, because lay attendance relatively low. That's another area. The third area is inclusion in mainstream school. You know, we talk about special education need, special school, whatever. And if in the southeast area, we want to move to more upstream inclusion support. We may talk about special school, having more special school, more than unit resource unit. We still need them, but for the long-term plan, we need to start to talk about how to build on the school's inclusion strength. Little actual help, expert at hand, or some place they call expert in hand, with all multi-agency expert like educational psychologists, occupational therapists, they all work together to support school. So that's being translated into some sort of more practical things for next 1 year or 2 years to be delivered. It's a great ambition program, particularly in STEM bit. How to change the culture will take a long time.
Yeah, I mean, that's great, and I agree with all of that. I think the key is the delivery of the sort of those new teachers and the retention and all the rest of it. You know, the schools work really well and have good communities in them, but what can sometimes undermine that is a shortage of staff, where you've got children being taught by supply teachers and all the rest of it, that rolls on, that impacts that sense of community. And where you've got strong established teachers that have been enrolled for a long time, the children absolutely buy in, and that, you know, you're their teacher very, very strongly, and that sense of, like say, being part of a community absolutely shines through in schools where that's happening. And it's just, how confident are we that we're going to be able to deliver that, so that children in the majority of their lessons feel like they have their teacher, that, you know, and their community, I think is the question I'm trying to ask.
Thank you. And I think it's a really important question to be asking, and how we can support the profession and support those colleagues working in the profession to feel enabled to deliver on this. And I think some of the chapter that's on support and investment, I mean, I've given you a really, really headline overview of that there are opportunities in that could be taken around flexible working, offering other opportunities to staff, the valuing and the well-being of staff, as well as the pay restructuring that appears in there, and the training and the professional opportunities that exist in there. I think there are opportunities to take, but I think you're absolutely right to highlight the challenge of this, and ensuring that those opportunities do come to fruition to enable this to be delivered the most effectively.
Thanks,
and the other thing I'd just draw to colleagues' attention is that the whole suite of documentation. So if you think about the white paper in terms of education reforms, and then you think about the change to the Ofsted framework, what you see is actually those two pieces working in tandem. So the Ofsted framework is very much looking at the type of things that the white paper is expecting to deliver on. So actually the two new innovations in the system seem to be working hand in glove together, which is a good place to be.
Thanks, Gillian. Any more questions for Gillian before we move on? Gillian, I'm very disappointed in your last meeting that I don't have a question for you, but I don't. So we shall move on.
Okay. The next section of the report is on education outcomes, because colleagues, you asked just for a review of how we had performed as a borough, how children had performed against national, regional and statistical neighbours. So you have there in front of you the early years foundation stage, phonics screening, Key Stage 1, just to highlight that since 2024, there are no published Key Stage 1 outcomes because those tests were removed. Then you have Key Stage 2 and Key Stage 4 and Key Stage 5 in respect of A levels. And then an explanation of our disadvantaged gap, which, as Emma has already referred to, is an area that we are particularly exercised about and focused on working on. And one of the white paper targets is actually nationally to reduce the disadvantaged gap by 50%. So that's a good KPI for us to look at local level and say, what is our gap currently? And absolutely, we need to reduce that by 50%. And you can see some of the actions that we've got outlined there in the report that are enabling us to work forward towards some of those changes. And then you have the SEND performance there as well. So I'll pause again at that point.
Moses? No? Oh, sorry, I thought you were going to ask a question. Any questions? No, we can carry on, Gillian.
Okay, so Ming, do you want to talk about EHCs? I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, I will briefly go through the SENS report. I think very much built on last meeting's update. In terms of SENS, special education need, Julian just mentioned about the gap of performance. I would like to highlight that people on SENS support perform well against the national peers in all subjects except Key Stage 2, that is slightly below, I think quite broadly in light. And in terms of ESCP timeliness, last meeting I reported we have a focused piece of work that be improved in Q3, improved to 68%. National average is about 50%. That's been sustained for about 6 months now, or 2 quarters have been reported on that. And I just mentioned that we have a focused piece of work, that's a multi-agency bi-weekly forum to check, to have really data deep dive to inquire to which section, which service actually haven't delivered the assessment on time. So we now want to move that to quality work as well. I will mention that later. Annual review, obviously, is of great interest to our parent. And this group has been raised the need to be updated in this group. In total, we have, up to today, we have 2,437 EHCP in place at the moment. In past 12 months, we carried out 746 reviews, a huge number. You know, as I mentioned that, we building on the strength of improved timeliness in past 6 months. We now want to use that bi-weekly focus group to focus on quality, not just quality on new EHCP, also quality of annual review, etc. One of the things parents have raised with us is if annual review not being conducted timely, because some of the description our child's need may be out of date, and then when you make a provision, may not meet the child current need. So we have great focus on that area of work. Just now, Gillian already alluded to national SAM reform, that link to school white paper. A school white paper itself is not SAM white paper. SAM reform is core bit of the school white paper. While school white paper promote inclusion, like Julian said, more upstream inclusion in order to reduce the needs of high-level SAM intervention. So currently there's a consultation taking place for SAM reform. Locally, Emma mentioned that we need to deliver a local SAM reform plan, which actually linked to our high need block government's plan to take over that deficit partially and then look at the future ownership of the high need budget. So we are really busy with a very tight deadline to deliver a same reform plan in next 9-10 weeks. And we mobilize all partners, not just about local authority, about school, health service as well. So that's the kind of development I want to let you know. The government do have ambition, like you said, create 1.6 billion. When that money is available, who is going to benefit from school? Also expert in hand, whether resources are being put in place in order for expert to be able to support school or not. But we are working on that with the partner. Another thing I really would like quickly to mention is really in terms of continued focus. We already mentioned in Julian's report, Emma said that we really want to narrow the disadvantage gap. Although we achieve our centers achieve in most area, most phases better than other areas. The gap is still big. It's nationally gap is big. Our gap is also bigger than. So we want to narrow the gap in terms of same children outcome, in terms of children who have a free school meal, who are in the more socially in a more disadvantaged background. Indeed, other locally we can identify as a disadvantaged group, like maybe I think like Sue just now earlier on said about new arrival, etc. You may have some language difficulty. That can be locally we identify the disadvantaged group. Although the DFE actually identify people who only see a free school meal as a disadvantaged group. Locally, we do have our own definition as well. So another thing we want to do is to sustain timelessness. Just now I talked about in the past 6 months, we improve that timelessness, but we want to sustain that. And really those are the few areas we really want to do, refocus on vulnerable learner support, sustain the improvement we achieve. Annual review is a focus, ESCP quality. Any question? Okay.
Questions for Ming? Moses?
Just a quick one, thanks, Ming. I wanted to find out, you seem to have a lot of annual reviews outstanding. Is that correct?
Ming?
My apology, I think yeah. Annual review, we have a big, huge backlog 2 years ago. Now we put the actual result we have in last summer term, we have a temporary staff was about to leave with the support of the council CLT. We let them to stay on to clear the backlog. There are two things here. One is the data entry. Some of the review actually being conducted, already been conducted, but not recorded this way. And then counted as the annual review not been done. While the other case, genuinely, annual review not being conducted timely, we identified that it's an issue. It's our focus area. We have action plan now. We want to focus on that. I think because it's important. Yeah.
So, yeah, just to clarify. So, whilst the local authority completes the initial EHCPs, annual reviews are delegated to schools and education providers to complete, and the local authority has a role in gathering those reviews and making sure and chasing up and following up the record of that review having happened. And that's the bit where we need to improve our systems, the relationship with our schools, to make sure that they're sharing that information with us when they have conducted a review. But the system that we have is that the annual reviews are delegated And so needing to get an improved system in place so that we've got an accurate understanding that those reviews have happened, they're leading to an accurate delivery of a support plan for a child, and they're changing as that child develops. So what was right in an EHCP when a child was 5 will not be what they need, and particularly around sort of transitions into new schools and secondary, really, really important that those reviews are happening and that plans are being updated and that support is adapting as children grow and develop. So it is a particular area of focus for us, but we are not unique in the country in terms of our systems for making sure and assuring ourselves that these are happening. It is much easier now that we have a permanent SEND team, which 2 years ago, 18 months ago, was not in place. It was, it was made up of agency workers. We have now invested in that team. That team will know and are tracking children. So that's why it's improving gradually. It needs, and as Ming says, we've dedicated some targeted resource to making sure that we get the recording, and we make sure that we're following up that those reviews have happened and taken place with our schools and education providers.
So just a quick follow-up. Does it have any negative impact on those with the plan if there's no timely review?
Yes. So what you may have is a plan for delivery in respect to certain types of support, and that needs to be updated, and there needs to be that clarity. Clearly, EHCPs have a legal standing. So, and I think that's one of the reflections in terms of the local area SEND system, that there are multiple different moving parts, and what it relies on is everybody doing what they need to be doing at the right time for children. And if collectively we don't do that as a system, then that does impact on children. It impacts on the support that is available to them, and that's not something that we want. We want to ensure that children have the right support at the right time. Ideally, children perhaps should not have to be subject to having a plan in order to be able to access the support that they need. And that's part of the developments of the local area SEND reform plan, is making sure that if a professional or a parent needs to talk to a speech and language therapist, or somebody who's got expertise in relation to neurodiversity, and being able to make reasonable adjustments, we should as a system have the skill set available to be able to do that. So part of the agenda is making sure that all professionals across the system have the skills necessary to be able to meet children's needs. I think there's a saying that every teacher is a teacher of children with SEND. It shouldn't be, whilst there are specialisms and we need to recognise that children there are some children who will need specialist support. Lots of children need an environment that can and has the capacity and the capability to make reasonable adjustments so that they can access the school day. And we need to work better as a system to support that.
Mary-Louise?
Yes. I was going to come on to that about the capacity of the system as it develops in the future, because as I understand it, where we're going is a situation where ideally children will move from, you know, targeted intervention to plus to, and that movement will be, you know, seamless. It's never really going to be, but much of the friction, in my experience, in the system comes from a lack of trust on the part of parents and caregivers, because they, you know, their experience has been that, you know, the fight to get the EHCP and then reviews are on, you know, frankly, experienced as an attempt on the part of those with power to take away that EHCP. You know, I'm not justifying that. I'm just saying that that is how the system is experienced. So I would just be interested, there's obviously no answer, or what moves you can be making now to try and address that sort of lack of trust in a system, which, as I understand it, is going to become more, needs to become more flexible, but that flexibility needs the trust of the parents.
And in order to win that trust, we as a system need to be listening more. And I think it will be nobody, I think, sitting around this table or on screen would, we have not got it right for all children and all parents. And I think there's a national debate about the implementation of the 2014 reforms, how that was resourced, how local authorities, how systems responded to those changes, and what that has created in terms of that erosion of trust that parents and carers and children and young people, some children and young people feel. So in terms of how we are working really closely with our Parent Carer Forum. In Wokingham, we have been working with our schools and our health and hugely supported by our Parent Carer Forums to introduce what's called the a PINS project. So it's partnership in neurodiversity in schools. That's gone into 30 primary schools. It's more 33 primary schools in the borough, and that's about parents and carers working alongside schools to really understand how to support schools in making those reasonable adjustments for children. It is through being in relationship, listening and hearing, learning from the experiences of children and families that we are going to have a system ultimately that works for children and families, but it needs to be resourced properly, both from you know, kind of I am a firm believer that no one working in children's services wants to come in to or to schools wants to come in and do a bad job by a child that's in their classroom or on their caseload. But there are sometimes systems and events that conspire that can set up some really difficult conversations and decisions that need to be made, and it shouldn't be that assessments and plans are used as gatekeeping tools. They should be documents that open up opportunities and make sure that the right tailored support is in place for children. But what we need is a system whereby we have rebuilt the skill set, that broader skill set and capacity within the system to meet children and families with where they are at. in order to support them. And I think that's going to be a big part of where the reforms are going in terms of being more inclusive as a system to support children and families.
Thanks, Emma. Okay, I'll hand back to Ming. As you finish, Ming.
Sorry, yeah. Just said about ESCP, we still issue ESCP with a letter for many for foreseeable future still there. After many children need ESCP, will get an ESCP. The government talk about individual support plan, ISP, electric form. I think it has been improved in some sector in the virtual school for local children. Individual PEP plan actually work well for the one don't need to HCP. I would like just to add on that. And in terms of saying, I think that's the end of my part of presentation. I don't have anything more to say unless you have any further question.
Any more questions for Gillian or Ming? Okay, no, thank you to you both then. And we'll move on to the school place planning update, which I think is going to be presented by Oliver. Is Oliver online?
He is. Hiya. Right. You have to I have to apologise in advance. I'm losing my voice a little bit here. But just going to give you a brief overview of the report. So this provides an update on the school place planning elements, which we do on an annual basis. So we did a report like this last year. And I think the intention is that we'll do this every year, as it were. And the report is broken down into 5 key areas in pupil place planning terms. So those being early years, mainstream primary, mainstream secondary, post 16, and specialist. So as it sets out at the start of the report, obviously all of our pupil place planning is fundamentally built on forecasting. And you can see the kind of methodology set out at the start of the report. But one thing I'd like to mention is that since we met last time, as it were, we've had a chance to test the robustness of our new forecasting methodology. So in that sense, that was based on the primary and secondary national offer data last year. And in that sense, we have effectively within primary schools, our forecasts were under 2% in terms of variance from our forecast, so 1.8%. And the secondary, it was within 0% variance. So I think we were like 2 pupils off, which is incredibly accurate. So we've substantially improved our accuracy on this iteration of the model, of the new model, and we're looking to kind of refine that and get that more accurate, in particular in relation to primary. But certainly we are confident now that our forecasting methodology is definitely along the right lines and gives us confidence in terms of the planning that we do on the basis of those forecasts. Okay. So breaking down into the core areas of the report, in terms of early years, it's a relatively short section because, broadly speaking, it's universally good news. As was reported in the previous report, the reflections on that in the Ofsted annual report in December 24 that we had more childcare OACs than anywhere else in the country, and that our early years sufficiency continues to be very strong in that respect. So no real concerns there. Obviously, early years is the landscape is developing in terms of like the enhanced entitlements that are being rolled out, in particular the enhanced entitlement for not those children with 9 months and above from September 2025. And that means that the work is continually ongoing to ensure that not just the kind of quantity of the places, but qualitatively to ensure that we have the right type of places in the right locations. So that work is ongoing, but like I say, that fundamentally it's a good news story and we have sufficient places, but we will continue to kind of keep that monitored. In terms of primary, The high level news story here is that we continue to have too many places in the borough. If you look at table 1, you'll note there that there is looking at the final column, which is kind of, if you want to focus on any column, is the key column. Between 25, 26 and 26, 27, you'll note that there's a drop in the surplus capacity from just under sort of 20%, so 1 in 5 places being vacant, to just over 10%, which is obviously like a significant improvement, because we do not want too many surplus places in the system, because it's uneconomical and financially unviable for schools to kind of carry those vacant places and still have to employ the same number of staff. So in that sense, what we've done in between 25, 26 and 26, 27 is we have consulted on and delivered a substantial sort of 7 FE reduction in capacity in the primary sector. That brings us closer to our target of approximately 5% surplus, which we believe to be a viable surplus. So obviously there is still more work to do, and as you can see in 27, 28, that number goes back up again, because of the fact that we are experiencing still kind of experiencing the effects of a falling birth rate. Now we think in 27, 28, that continual drop in numbers actually kind of halts, and what you see from that point onwards is you see like a trickling up of the numbers as a combination of kind of, you know, a small increase in the birth rate, but also kind of housing developments, etc. So in that sense, we think we're at the kind of at the nadir, if you will, of the birth rate kind of drop, as it were. So in that sense, I think it's fair to say that we can kind of confidently plan in the medium term for exactly kind of the degree of PAN reductions that we require in the primary sector, and so we estimate that to be in the region of about 5 forms of entry. Now we'll say that we have been undertaking ongoing engagement with partners through the Working with Education Partnership, and we feel confident that we will be able to jointly announce consultant proposals in the autumn that will get us the vast majority of the way down, I'd say. So hopefully by this time next year, I should be able to present you with something that forecasts for surpluses certainly in the single digits looking forwards, and certainly very close to 5%, if not 5% itself. So I believe at the last time we had this meeting, there was a request for us to kind of break that high level borough data down into the kind of planning areas. So there are 7 primary planning areas within Wokingham, and you can see those set out in table 2 in relation to just taking a snapshot of the 2132 to 2132 to 2131 to 2132 forecasts, looking at kind of where the endpoint leads us in each of those kind of planning areas. Now, in that respect, you can see there within the table, there's obviously a significant degree of variance between the various planning areas, but it's a common message across all but one of them, basically that we need to reduce capacity by kind of varying degrees. Obviously, you have your kind of highest number there in Woodley, like a significant amount of reduction is required there, whereas in the Wokingham Town East and Wokingham Town West, like it's actually like a smaller amount of reduction, but still reduction is required to kind of get us to what we consider to be sustainable levels. The exception to that is the Southwest, where people will be aware there has been an ongoing deficit of provision in terms of numbers versus capacity. But again, as people will be aware, hopefully, within the MTFP approval process that occurred in February, we have now approved plans to deliver a 1 FE primary school within Shinfield, the Spencer's Wood Primary School. And if we deliver that, you'll notice there that, you know, we're forecasting 28% kind of deficit, sorry, 28 place deficit. And obviously a 1 FE primary school would deliver 30 places. So actually it's kind of very tightly aligned to what we believe we require there, which is good. In that sense, it's worth noting that we are intending to deliver that new school as effectively as a school relocation. And we're doing that basically in order to not create additional capacity within the borough as a whole, because if you create additional capacity within the southwest, that will mean that relative to previous times, that will mean fewer people going out of the southwest and then therefore filling up schools in the neighbouring areas. And what we want to do therefore is, if we are going to create that that element of kind of creating kind of local provision, which we should do, we want to do that in a way that doesn't then harm the kind of wider school system. So by relocating a school from an area of oversupplied places to an area of undersupplied places, you can kind of meet local demand, but in a way that ensures that you don't kind of harm the wider school system. So in that respect, we have opened up the expression of interest process on the 9th of this month, which has gone out to all admissions authorities, all primary schools, and we've opened that up, like I say, to all primary schools within Wokingham who may be interested in relocating there. Now, I will say the one exclusion to that is any schools within the southwest area, because we don't want to move a school within the southwest area because it wouldn't create any additional net capacity in that area, which is obviously what we're aiming to achieve through this. So any primary schools outside of the southwest area are open to expressing an interest in this. And that process will close at the end of March, after which we will be kind of initiating a formal bidding process for those that have expressed an interest, which will be reviewed by an independent panel. And once those formal bids, like I said, have been submitted, it'll be assessed by the panel with a view to reaching a decision in, well, certainly before the end of the academic year, such that we can start formal consultation, because there'll be a statutory process that has to go alongside that once a provisional provider has been selected, such that a statutory consultation can be conducted in the autumn with a view to having a provider formally agreed and all the legal elements sorted by the end of the year. And then obviously alongside that, it's worth noting that there's obviously a build program which was initiated pretty much the day after the NTFP approval. So at the moment, they're just in the process of appointing the consultant team, and that will then kind of lead into a formal procurement process for the contractor, with a view to delivering that new school building by September 2028. Pour some water there, 2 seconds. So moving on to secondary, I guess looking at the table, you would say, well, that's those numbers are pretty good. But what we'll say is, looking at the second column, that's only as a function of the fact that we are forecasting an agreed strategy to reduce places, to reduce capacity in secondary schools. So the first thing I'd like to draw your attention to is the PAN change between 25-26 and 26-27. Now you'll note that we've reduced capacity effectively between last year and this year by 3 forms of entry, and that has that's been done again in work in partnership between our secondaries. Now, the strategy we're looking to do overall here, which is what you see reflected in that second column, is to reduce capacity by reducing over-offering, because previously within the secondary sector, we have been through a period of kind of substantial growth, and that has led to us kind of having an agreed strategy of secondaries over-offering relative to their PAN. So our initial strategy is for those secondary schools that have been over-offering to taper down that over-offering over time, such that they kind of effectively kind of get back to their original PANs. And that's what you see reflected in that second column. Now, the strategy for 26-27 and 27-28 is agreed. What I will say is, if you look at the final column, the surplus capacity on 27-28, it is very close to the wire. So I'm reserving the right to keep that under review. And if we don't see any movement in that in terms of, because we are going to go through another iteration of updating our forecasting in between now and when we have to make a decision on this, then I already have a number of schools, let's say, who have said that they would be willing to kind of revise their offering back upwards, such that we had a little bit more comfort there. So in a similar kind of number of surplus places to what we had for 26-27, which, as we say kind of later on in the report, in terms of the 26th National Offer Day, has worked really well. So we've had, like I say, sort of forecast surplus places of around just over 2%. But we've managed to deliver preferences, if you look at the preference table there, which is the next table down, broadly in line with what we delivered last year, which in itself was an improvement on previous years. So in that sense, I think we can be confident that if we kind of work broadly in line with that strategy of tapering down, that we'll be able to effectively balance the need to ensure school sustainability whilst also maintaining kind of a healthy preference meeting rate, if you will, within the secondary sector. I will say that table 5 has been incorrectly labelled. My apologies for that. That's actually the secondary planning area forecasts. So similarly to the way that the primary sector is broken down into 7 planning areas, the secondary forecasts are broken down into 2 planning areas, those being north and south. I will say, though, that's really provided for informational purposes only, because we effectively plan secondary places most being directed mostly by on a borough-wide basis, because there is quite a lot of movement between the north and south. There is in particular kind of movement from the south to the north in pupil terms. And so, whereas you might see kind of a lower surplus in the south than there is in the north, in reality, that isn't actually picked up as a material issue when you actually kind of map out how preferences work out across the borough. So we feel confident that as long as we have, broadly speaking, as long as the north or the south isn't showing like a substantial deficit in one of those areas, then we can feel confident planning this on a borough-wide basis. And indeed, that neither of those 2 areas show any kind of cause for concern in that respect. I will say, actually, sorry, the one final thing to say on the secondary sector is you'll note if you go back to table 3, you'll note that between sort of 2030-31 and 2031-32, that there is a substantial increase in that surplus capacity. And that's because we effectively exhaust our capacity to reduce over-offering at that point, because we're already back to the original plan at that stage. Now, 21-32 is a long way away, and a lot can happen between now and then in terms of house building, in terms of kind of schools popularity and all of those kind of things. So we're not going to be formalising any plans for formal plan reductions in 21-31 and 2030-31 and 2030-32 at this stage. So in that sense, like I say, we're just going to be kind of keeping a watchful eye on that as we progress toward that day. So in terms of post-16, the broad picture, we break this up into kind of 2 core categories, because within Wokingham, we only effectively have school sixth forms, and so in that sense, the broad picture as sort of set out in table 5 is that we do have sufficient capacity. It gets kind of close-ish in 2029-30. But again, like with the work that we've done in terms of the proposals and the capacity that is being delivered to increase to deliver a new sixth form at Bohun, and also to create a permanent sixth form at Embrook, which has recently been initiated as a function of the MTFP approval. As a function of both of those things, we are confident that we are meeting need for school sixth form places within Wokingham for the foreseeable future. So no concerns in that respect. The only concerns which we're highlighting is in relation to the stuff that we don't control, which is the practice-based vocational provision, which is effectively exclusively provided outside the borough. In that respect, as highlighted in the report, all our strategy for this will be reflected, hopefully developed within the skills and employment strategy, which I understand is the next agenda item, so I won't dwell on that too much. But in effect, that strategy that evolves out of that will be looking at the lack of in-borough provision for some of those vocational courses, and then how we might react to that in a wider context. Moving on to specialist provision, as you'll see from table 2 seconds. As you'll see from table 6, So since the last time I came to present on this, and this time we have developed and published the sense efficiency statement, which feeds into the school organisation plan, and this is kind of, I guess, the kind of the key takeaway from the gap analysis is table 6 that's presented in the sense efficiency statement. So in that respect, you'll see that we effectively have gaps in provision across all need types, across all age groups, effectively is the key message there. All of those numbers are negative. So it's clear that we need to deliver more capacity to meet need within the borough. And in that respect, I'm pleased to be able to say that we have a strategy to do precisely that. So some highlights for what we are delivering for this September. 6 new resource spaces and SEN units at mainstream settings, which together deliver 106 new places, new specialist places within the borough. And also the post-16 SEND hub, which will open in the former working library in September, which will mark like qualitatively like a whole new venture for the council and for SEND provision within the borough in terms of providing dedicated post-16 capacity and new kind of vocational or employment-led courses within a town centre location. Also worth noting in that respect that we have recently approved the acceptance of a financial settlement to deliver a new special school locally in place of the National Special Preschools Programme. And that will, along those lines, we'll be seeking to deliver a new special school by September 2028. Now, saying that in the wider context of the sense efficiency statement, you'll see there the plans for new specialist capacity set out by kind of age bracket, so early years, primary, secondary, and post-16. You'll see kind of the bulk of that really rests on new special schools. So that includes the new special school that I mentioned previously that we're aiming to deliver up at the Rooks Nest site. And also, as part of the Spencer's Wood proposal, as I said, we're looking to relocate a school. So that would free up a school site to potentially be repurposed as for special school provision. So that we are hoping that via that kind of strategy, they'll be able to deliver 2 new special schools effectively, one new and one refurbished. So those are 2 core elements of our sense efficiency strategy, as well as like another core backbone component is the idea of new resource bases, which, as I said, we're rolling out for this September, but also we have a kind of a forward plan to deliver over the course of the next 3 years as well. And as well, the initial reception of our post-16 SEND hub in Wokingham has been very well received, I think, by parents. It's certainly like, you know, there were a lot of people who have expressed more interest in places than we have places in the first year, which is really positive. So we have plans to develop 2 more such hubs across the borough, such that we can provide these kind of provisions local to people, not just within Wokingham, but spread across the borough in town centre locations. And within the capital programme element of the table there, you'll see that the programme of capital investment broken down to mainstream and specialist over the course of 2026, so the current year, but also the following 3 years over the course of the MTFP cycle. That's our strategy for delivery of new mainstream and specialist places. And I think on that note, I can conclude my summary.
Thank you very much, Oliver, for pulling that off despite your obvious cold. It's much appreciated. Have we got any questions for Oliver? Oh, Moses.
It's a quick one. I see these numbers all the time. So I'm just looking at the post-16. We have 80 places for post-16 without looking at the breakdown. Looks drastically short, 80 to 249. It's quite a huge difference.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things I should note there. One is that as part of our sensitivity strategy, the special school places will be delivering new special school capacity. We're at post 16 as well. But the other thing I should note is that in none of those categories will we be seeking to get those numbers to zero, as it were, or provide a surplus of places, because there will always be a contingent of pupils whose needs will be better met potentially outside the borough. And in that case, that is the element of our strategy, is that we assume that we will so not necessarily just outside the borough, but at the independent non-maintained sector as well. So in that sense, we're not planning on having complete sufficiency in that sense, but because some of those elements of provision would just be too costly to provide in a piecemeal fashion, borough by borough. We're looking to have a strategy that kind of delivers what we can reasonably provide ourselves, whilst also appreciating that there will always be a reliance to a certain degree for more specialist provision on the specialist sector.
So
does that make sense?
Just to come back on that, Oliver. So if we're providing, say, 1/3 within the borough, 2/3 is outside, doesn't that cost us a lot of home to school transport? Is that more economical for the borough?
So I would first clarify. So it's not like 1/3 of the total provision, because we already have provision in borough, as it were. It's 1/3 of the identified gap, as it were. So yeah, there are home school transport implications. I mean, I can take it as an action. I mean, people will know that I am not averse to asking for money as part of the NTFP cycle. But I mean, obviously, any new provision would necessitate that. But I'll take it as an action. I mean, obviously, the sense efficiency statement was something that we developed last year, and by all means, it's something that we can review this year. But yeah, we can look at post 16 again, and I can get you like a precise answer to that. I'll give you a very general answer. I can give you a precise answer to that, and if you know, it's a fair question, and if on reflection on that question, we think that actually, like, you know, maybe we need another such provision, then we can certainly look at that. So I'll take that as an action from this meeting to kind of look at that in more detail, and come back with an answer at some point.
Thanks, Oliver. Okay, Moses. Yep. Any more? Any online? No. Thanks a lot, Oliver. Go and have a lem sip. Get yourself well soon. We're getting there, team. Slowly but surely. I think this is the longest meeting on record. Don't blame me. I'm going to hand over now to Mark, who's going to introduce Nikki and our skills and employment strategy session.
I was, yeah, hello. Yeah, I know. The
I'm glad you came for the whole meeting.
I was going to text Nikki and just say, do you think after 3 hours they're going to take this in? Because I actually don't think you will. So shall we postpone, do you think, and put it on the next agenda? That'll let everybody off, won't it? I was going to text Nikki and say that. How do you feel, Nikki? You've waited there all this time. But
I am happy to deliver now, but if everybody would rather postpone and have it on another one, I'm equally happy to come back.
Okay, well, look, I propose, Chair, that because I don't think you're going to take it in, and this is really important.
Let's take a vote on it. All those in favour of postponing till the next meeting, with apologies to Nikki, who's not only prepared for tonight, but has sat through 3 hours of the meeting.
It's probably going to kill me later, but no.
What are people thinking? Postpone. Okay. Yeah. Is that all right, Emma?
Confidence in the chairman.
You can put it first on the agenda. Yeah, Nikki, you get first dibs on the next agenda, so you don't have to wait.
I was going to negotiate that, Nikki, yeah. But look, thank you for having us. And the one thing I've got to say is that the theme of this meeting and is heartening and enlightening that it travels in, doesn't it, Nikki, into into our strategy, and especially the inequality, the gap that we've got between the haves and the have-nots. So it's too important at 3 hours in. Thank you.
Agreed. Thank you for coming, Mark.
That's all right.
Right, we shall cross that off for now, and it's first on the agenda at our next meeting. Thanks, Nikki.
No worries.
And I hope you understand why we're doing it for the right reason.
Yeah,
all right.
no, absolutely. Thank you. Take care, guys.
Let me
Bye.
off, Nikki, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So
Bye-bye.
if we move on to the forward programme, has anyone got any comment? You sure you don't want to stay till the end of the meeting, Mark? No? The thing I would ask is when we want Jonathan to come back. When's realistic time-wise, Emma, for the work he's got to do to make it worthwhile him coming back?
I would suggest probably towards the latter half of the year.
So September or November?
Probably November.
November.
I think.
Okay.
That would be really, that would be good.
Yeah.
Then hopefully we can also give you some impact information as part of that. Yeah.
Any other comments on the upcoming meetings? Okay, so we'll take that. The next one then is the action tracker. Anyone see anything on there that needs to be moved? Oh, we're rattling through these, aren't we? Might get home before 11. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we're now going to go into part 2 of the meeting with exclusion of the public, that under section 100A brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public are to be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act, as